So with that, let me start with Bob Troyer. And Bob, we've moved the video camera so that you all can make your pitches from where you're seated. You don't need to get up here in the front or walk around. As I said before, what we're asking for each of you is 5 minutes. I have the clicker for this main presentation, so just when you're ready to move forward, or if you want me to just kind of scroll through, I'll be happy to do that. If there's some backup you want to pick up, Gina is going to handle that over on that screen. And with that, are you ready, Bob?
I guess I'm ready.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. My first area of interest was increasing the level of inclusion of subsets of the community that may not be as much connected as others. And specifically, we're looking at, the slide shows Hispanics and Chin. These are basically the two largest ethnic communities, although that's not quite true. In looking at this a little more, I think I would like to include the Indian community in this, because it turns out that the Indian community makes up about over 9% of our population. The Hispanics and Chins are historically less involved in the city. I don't think we may know what the impact of the Indian community is. And I think part of that may be that the Indian community tends to be more educated, more professional, and also I think with the Indians, there is a range of religious backgrounds that we don't see in the Hispanic and Chin communities. With the Indian community, we have a combination of Muslim, Hindu, and Christian, as well as some other minor religions. But anyway,
so your objective is to try to get them more engaged, more participation.
Get them more engaged, and actually, as in the next slide, basically, I don't think we know at this point.
Highlight the main steps you have.
I don't think we know at this point how much inclusion there is. We do know that with the Chin community, we have the Chin ministries that is very active, and with the Hispanics, we can see some things that we're doing. I think this Fiesta Chara is a good step in including the Hispanic community, but I do think we need to do some more research in terms of trying to identify, what is the issue and what are the causes of the lack of participation, if there is a lack of participation.
So that would be kind of the action step, is doing some research to figure out what's behind that. And are there other, I think the other
and then
issues you want
the
to
success, I don't know if we can get, voter results, we may not, that's sort of difficult to do, although we can sort of do exit polls or things, I guess, of that. But just to program participation, especially during the Songs of Lewisville, the festivals that we have, everything else, try to get some indication of what the participation is of the various groups.
And
there
you're
are, of
looking at
course,
voters voting as well.
Yeah, the voters too. There are potential obstacles, especially with the Chin community, getting the word out, because Chins do not have a well-known written language. It's hard to put out materials for that community, so it has to be, basically, materials have to be visual and more one-on-one, I think, than with the others. So, I would like to see more inclusion. One of my main things in getting involved was lack of voting across the board. But I think getting more of all the communities involved would be good.
And so those, again, the action steps would be looking at some surveying to figure out what the root causes are, looking at ways you could change the programming to get more engagement from all of those folks. use these measurements to tell if that's happening.
Yes.
All right. So you are right on time. Let me see if there are questions or comments from your other colleagues about this idea on community inclusion. Feedback, comments, questions?
I mean, it's always a great idea. I think one thing that may help, and you may be able to use Youth Action Council because we have a broad swath of ethnic diversity there, which includes the Chin community. You may want to talk to the kids and see what may be the best way to bring those communications.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I was going to mention that the participation in the youth activity or youth action council is really, I'm really pleased with that, so.
Yeah, so that's a great way to build that. So that could be a component of what you're talking about.
Well, the event in May is a good step towards that too, the one at the rodeo grounds.
The Fiesta Charlie.
And I think that's the way we have to do it. We have to do fun events. I think it's going to be hard to, I don't know how else we do it.
Right.
Food and fun.
Yeah.
The Lebanese Food Festival.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. And I think maybe that might be where we can, for example, the Lebanese Food Festival. I don't know if we've ever had staff go out there and say, hey, how could we get more engaged with you guys?
We have not. I mean, that's been separately run from the city. Certainly a lot of us attend. It's a great event.
Sure.
But we have not had any involvement in that coordination.
And I'm not considering it as far as the city be involved with it, but would there be a way for us to reach out to that community and say, hey, how could we help you guys feel more like part of Lewisville? I don't know.
If you want me to, we certainly can.
So maybe that might be a component of this idea would be to look at some things like that where somebody could go and reach out to see about it. Okay, other questions or comments from anybody? Okay, so if you have your keypads there, how important is this outcome that Bob described of increasing the participation in these communities? How important is that outcome to Lewisville's future success? Okay, obviously this is something that's an important issue for us to be thinking about and going forward. Now this is the question with the longer set of choices. What should happen next on this issue of interest? And again, these choices: fully fund these action steps next fiscal year, fund some action steps next fiscal year, do some more investigation next year, defer action to 1920 or later, take no action, I need more information, we need more dialogue. Okay, so Melinda is going to be our writer here. So 0 on the fully fund and 33 on the next one. Okay, so Mr. Troyer, next topic.
Okay, my second item is looking at a bike share program. And basically what I'm interested in is making sure that we come up with an ordinance or a program that will protect the interests of the community. And I had hoped that we'd have an object lesson as we came in this morning.
And we did.
Unfortunately, well, we did, but most of the bikes that I saw were nicely parked.
I must have come in a different way than
Say
you
we're
did.
everywhere.
But anyway, I didn't see anything like this. It's on the side here, but that's definitely something I want to make sure we don't have happen.
That's that protecting from cycle litter.
We have cycle litter and all of that. And there've been all kinds of, Facebook posts and everything else about that. But my main interest here is to make sure that we have a plan, so when the bikes begin showing up, or when we have something to make sure that we can regulate bikes as they come in. Let's go to the next.
So there's some of the action steps.
Yeah, some of the action steps. And one of the things that when I came up with these ideas, as often happens, when I went in to talk with staff about this, I found out that they were already on top of it. So it wasn't really something that I, in both cases. But we need to look at look at what's going on in other communities, study what's available in terms of, the difference between dockless and docked stations. It appears that at least in the downtown area here in Dallas, most of the bikes are in, well, I don't know if they're actually corrals, but they seem to be parked in specific locations. I saw a few that were just outside of the corral areas. One thing I haven't seen is anybody riding a bike. So that's,
I saw that.
that's,
I saw one.
but I understand we had at least two show up in Lewisville this past week. And I did see, about 2 weeks ago, I did see someone riding on Garden Ridge, one of these green bikes. So he must have either came from Dallas or from Denton, and was riding there. But
And
so I think we need,
your
these are
recommendations here.
these are the action steps, and I think we need to look at this and, come up with something that includes, as I would say, we need to have, the bike companies, we would want to be registered and have to have a permit. We need to, I think, we need to make sure that we cover the maximum number of bikes. I understand there's something like 10,000 bikes in Dallas now. We don't need nearly that many. We need to restrict how many bikes there are. We need to have some idea of where we want them to be located. I'm not sure that the docking is reasonable and it will work. I would also like to see something in whatever we propose that would ensure that there are bikes available in the lower income areas. Some way of making sure that there are bikes available to people that don't have any other way of getting around. And who's the other?
Look at your
So,
other
yeah.
recommendations.
Oh, the other one is, Dallas is looking at using the GPS information from the bikes to identify where bike lanes are necessary on streets. And I think that's one thing that we want to make sure that we do include in any regulations, ordinance, whatever, that we have access to that GPS data from the bike companies. And then, how do we make sure if a bike shows up where it shouldn't be, who's going to take care of it? How soon does it have to be taken care of, that sort of thing. So
Okay, so that's your
That's
proposal for looking at bike shares of.
it's very nebulous at this point.
Okay, but I think I heard from
We
you
need
some investigation of what's working, some kind of an ordinance to manage something, and then figure out how to take advantage of it in at least a couple of places. I think kind of what I was saying. What kinds of thoughts and questions do the others of you have?
I've got, if you don't have if you have documents, what incentive do the people have to take it back or to put it back? Put the bike back anywhere.
As I understand it, most of the companies, once you finish your ride, they leave. It's dockless. They leave the bike wherever it is. But if we have the rules set up for where the bikes can be left, the company is responsible for making sure that, if it's in the middle of a field somewhere, that they have to pick it up and move it, bring it back.
The other thing too is getting businesses involved, because all of a sudden there's 10 of
Yes.
them dumped on Tom Thumb. If I'm the Tom Thumb manager, they may be in my dumpster.
Right.
So getting the businesses involved in figuring out your strategy.
I don't want that junk on my property.
Okay, and
But that's what I was going
Right.
with on to have the
What
dock
happens with
place,
the mall line?
it has to be a defined spot where it is, and they're activated by a credit card.
Yeah.
And if
Well,
they
they're
don't
act-
bring
yeah,
them back, they're charged for the
Right.
dock.
Yeah. And I
The
think
problem with- the
that's some
problem-
of what,
yeah.
what Dallas is learning by.
Which is gonna be a problem.
Yes.
If you're talking about the area that people can't afford it anyway,
Yeah.
they're probably not gonna have a credit card to put up with the bike.
Well, there are a couple companies that are handling that by subsidizing the people that can't pay by the people that do. You know,
But
so
how would
they're-
they still do the dock? Or-
Well, that's the problem with docking is you have to know, you have to decide where you want to, what locations you're gonna use.
Mhm.
And I see a problem with that. I can see that we could have docks at the DCTA stations, but then where do people go from there? Like we'd have to have a couple docking stations downtown.
I don't think we would have any.
Well, we wouldn't, I know, but
But there would be
we would have to regulate where those can be.
And what I would see is that that's the bike people's business, and for Tom Thumb, they would have to have a contract with Tom Thumb.
Right.
And
And so I think there are lots of those details, and I'm certainly not the expert on that, but it seems like different cities are taking different approaches. I think what you're suggesting is that y'all should do some
We need to-
research to figure out and act on that,
Yes.
kind of getting ahead of it. before
If
they
we
start
aren't
showing up.
proactive, they're gonna show up, and then we're gonna be behind the eight ball.
I don't mind having it, I'm just saying we need,
Right.
to have a free-for-all of bicycles doesn't make any sense at all.
I agree.
And I'm surprised Dallas did that, because supposedly they had, some of these companies come in with 10,000 bicycles, and they just started putting them all over the place, and they're not really sure where they were.
Right.
Yeah, and so I think what I think Bob's suggestion here is to do something to get ahead of the curve and not just have it be that free-for-all. TJ, you have a?
Yeah, I got 2 points. One is I think we need to have some sort of ordinance because they're already starting to show up. Second, the one thing that I thought out of all of this was the very most promising thing was the GPS data. I thought that was really cool and exciting. And the wonderful thing about that is that we can talk to 2 companies already. We can talk to a company called Strava, and we can talk to a company called Map My Ride. Both of those are used by the bicycling community, and we can find the heat maps right there without new bicycles all over the city.
Right.
Those are
So
heat
that might
maps
be
of
something to do.
actual users.
So
Yeah,
that could be
right,
something to go on.
And that would, for me, where does our bicycling infrastructure go? That would be cool. But it's existing data with existing companies on existing apps. I don't have to put a bunch of bikes around the city to figure it out.
Okay, so, and again, today, we're not gonna figure it all out, we're just, this is level of interest to the board.
I'd sort of double down on something that TJ just said. And you're familiar with this, depending on how you collect statistics, you get totally different answers. So the person who uses a shared bicycle and where they would go with it, the person who owns a bicycle, where they would go with it, could be 2 totally different places.
Absolutely.
And so my first focus, to be perfectly honest, is the one who owns the bicycle.
Yep.
Those are the people that are committed long-term riders. And so if I'm looking at bike lanes, I'm much more interested in where they're going than I am a rent-a-bike person.
There was a question about where would they be going to. I think 2 logical places are DCTA, which takes into Dark, and LLELA. That we would have something at LLELA that people could drive their cars at and use.
Well, except that Leela's not allowed bicycles.
Well, we'd have to work on that.
Yeah, that's a
Or you
concern.
could have a bike from DCTA to the.
Yeah.
At one time, LLELA and the Corps of Engineers didn't want people out there. So we can go along. And before that, they had hunting out there.
Okay, any other further questions before we get a
Well,
sense?
I
Brent?
work in Dallas, and I play Where's Waldo with these bicycles. I see them every day, and I actually saw the story, and the majority of those bikes end up at a transit station or a bus stop.
Yep.
That's where they all seem to be, or at Dallas ISD behind the dumpster. I mean, seriously, the challenge that we're gonna have is how do you regulate, you say that the companies have to have a permit, but there's no restriction on where those bikes can end up. So we gotta ask ourselves, okay, how do we deal with that? How do we address that? I know Highland Park is actually working on something now.
Denton's got a whole new ordinance structure.
So
Yeah.
those are the things that we need, those are the big things that we need to figure out how we operate. I think the bikes are a great idea. but it's a great idea that's kind of gone awry. And,
Yeah,
you know,
and so I think Bob's idea here is that you should do that work together.
Yeah.
That is how I
Need that work.
So with that, let me ask you all, how important is this outcome of addressing the bike sharing and getting ahead of it? How important is that outcome to Lewisville's future success? Okay, mix of ideas. What should happen next on this outcome? Again, you can see these answer choices are the same for all of them. It's always going to be the same set. Okay, 0 on fully funded and 17 on some, and there's a fair amount on investigation. We'll, as I said before, we'll have all of these responses later on, but for the last part of our segment today, we're concentrating on ones with the higher sense of priority. So next up, we have Mr. Ferguson, and here's your first item. As you see on all of these, I've tried to highlight the main outcome thing, so it's easy for everybody to concentrate on that. So you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think. So first of all, there were some late changes to this because and I told Donna I would tell you I take full blame when we were trying to work through this. I was dealing with about 60 different crises and just didn't have time to fool with it. And the first change that came across late, if you have a printed copy, is it says integration, not inclusion. So the whole context of this is a bit like a variation on Bob's first item. He had a focus on cultural integration. This is more almost a demographic integration, but it's cultural too. I will take you back briefly, very briefly, to Fort Worth 2 years ago. I think it was the second day we were there, early in the afternoon. I made the comment that growing up at Oak Cliff, I watched what happened between, and by the way, many of you may not realize Oak Cliff used to be its own city and it was annexed by Dallas. And so I watched what happened between one side of the city, which was more blue collar, although it had some fancy neighborhoods like Kessler Park. It had plenty of white collar workers. And the other side of the river, and especially the further you went north, and how you can watch a city council meeting in Dallas today and still see this giant gulf of divide. And the interesting commonality here is the demographic difference and also the physical separation. In both cases, our separation with Castle Hills and Oak Cliff with Dallas is the Trinity River. So they literally have the same geographic issue that sort of creates part of their problem, and then a vast difference in their demographics. So I'm not going to sit here and read all these bullet items. You can, if you haven't already read them, look through them.
Go through them quickly.
If you want, I would say on most of these bullets, if you want to add a phrase "and vice versa," like you saw added to the bottom one, that was a late change, add vice versa, because it's a two-sided issue. It's not Castle Hills needs to like us better. We have the same problem going the other direction. So, and there are also some items that are scattered through here. So I'm probably not handling this the way you want, but that's okay. There's some items scattered through here that are, to me, sort of a given that we're going to educate Castle Hills on the resources that are available to them now that they're, annexed in and part of the city of Lewisville. The biggest comment I would make is that I also make to staff was that this is very hard to measure. It's like Bob's cultural integration. It's very hard to measure. I know what failure looks like, and I know it's going to be hard to, I'd have to divide into two separate population test groups to figure out what did we succeed. But if you don't do something, I can tell you where you'll end up, and that is failure. To the degree that you can achieve any kind of better integration between the two sides, clearly the city benefits. We get more done, we're more productive, we're not fighting back and forth. Council's more, cohesive in its actions. And I think the trick as much as anything, is just if you put two different people in the same room long enough, they'll discover what they have in common. And so I could wrap up right there.
Okay, so let me just go through any other points on that.
Well, I mean, do you want me to sit and talk? Or?
Just if there's anything else that you want to note before we open up the conversation.
Well, let's look at the obstacles. I mean, again, just read them. There they are.
Okay, and so really, as you said, this is to integrate, to incorporate and include everybody, and so the steps that you've identified here are really ones that get that going both directions, getting more engagement both directions.
And I would emphasize that point, it's kind of where I started with. I can tell you what happens if you don't. And if you don't, if you want to see it, you're sitting in the middle of it right now. And I don't know that you can completely cure this problem. In fact, something that came up talking to staff, cut me off, my time comes up. You have a section of Castle Hills that probably feels that it's completely separated from the rest of Castle Hills by the gate that wraps around it. And so, within Castle Hills, you get this sort of thing going. Within cultures, you get this sort of thing going. But especially when you have this kind of demographic difference, the old Lewisville, the current Lewisville, more blue collar, Castle Hills more white collar, income levels different, education different. The list goes on.
Okay.
Multifamily, single family.
Yeah, multi and single.
I was waiting for it to go off.
There you go. Okay.
Eric caught it before I started reading. So okay, but I think we understand though, Neil, the concern and the ideas about what you'd like to do on that. Let me get some feedback from everybody else on that idea as something to pursue this year.
I think that's a big piece of why I like Marty. I think the vision of Marty can really drive this. And I think some of the ideas that are later on kind of tie to that. I've talked with several folks. I love the Hebron High School logo, Neil. I've talked with several folks over there. I think we need to put a full court press to have every city that feeds into Hebron help pay for the logo component of that if we choose to do that. Because there's 5 cities that feed into it. But I think there's some things we can definitely do. I'd like to spearpoint that with Marty.
But the more, keep in mind, just comment on that Marty kind of is the one that I start to compartmentalize into we're going to do things to educate them on what services and resources we have anyway. So this,
Okay.
I mean, I'm not making an assumption, we're going to do those. So this is more, what do you do beyond just, okay, here's what your resources are.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that's, if I understood your concept correctly, it's not so much about which specific tool, but really it's looking at the package figured
Yes.
out way to move forward.
Gotcha.
Okay. Other comments?
Thanks, Dan.
Since I'm probably the newest resident in Lewisville, I would say that I've talked to people in Castle Hills, and their level of what city we're in is kind of humorous at this point. But
Yes.
I think the focus, what may help, and I've talked to Don about this in the past, is maybe where on boards and commissions that we can allow, when you don't have to be a homeowner in Lewisville, we get them in as soon as possible. We
To start that transition.
Right, we definitely get them into Lewisville Citizens University so they can learn about Lewisville. I think the more you learn about Lewisville, the more you love it. And we have to make some effort to go out there and talk to them as well. I mean, it is a different demographic, but generally people like where they live. And the only way to physically, because the divide is real, that this is 121 divide, San Rayburn divide is real, and that's problematic. And I'll be talking about the entranceway later. But we need to actually extend our hand and work with those people. And we've seen with Citizens University, when people are misinformed about things, they can say, hey, wait, that's not right. So we need to get them to understand more about Lewisville. The more you learn about it, the more I think they'll assimilate.
Okay, so those are, again, some good tools and ideas, carrying that out.
Also keep in mind, because I think a lot of this is more culturally oriented, and I go with you on the things you said, a lot of this is more culturally oriented, so it's as much getting Lewisville to go over to Castle Hills as it is to get Castle Hills to come over to Lewisville.
Yeah,
It's
really,
not a
well,
one-way
that vice
street.
versa part is really,
Yes, and
I
vice
hear
versa.
that being a big part of what you're suggesting.
Like some citizens, we know that friends with them, take them over.
Are there other comments or questions on this one, or are we ready to?
I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to decide here.
of what we're trying to, what the idea is that we're trying to respond to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it that there's such a cultural divide that we can't ever get together on? Or
If you do
do we
nothing,
need to make everybody to the middle, or don't worry about it? I don't know how you come up with that. What are we trying to do?
if you do nothing, then you just already spelled out the outcome. So.
No. What is the question?
What,
The question,
what is that outcome of what you're trying to achieve?
yes,
Is here, right? The outcome is.
how do I achieve an integrated
inclusion
Lewisville?
of those, and so then so the idea, the outcome, I think, if I understood correctly, the outcome that he'd like to see is inclusion of those people who are currently Castle Hill residents.
So is
that
the
they're-
deal right now they're being excluded?
No, there's just, again, it's, my analogy is Oak Cliff and Dallas. If they failed to do anything to try and bridge that divide, and so that's why you have the situation we have today. If we fail to do anything to bridge the divide, we'll have the same situation. If we do something and it fails, we're no worse off. But if we do nothing, I know the outcome. And so it's an interesting matrix because there's no one square on the matrix that says this is guaranteed success, but there is a square that says this is guaranteed failure.
And so I think what I heard you describing was efforts, and I presume this goes along with that annexation timing that we discussed earlier.
Well, and I've always said,
Ahead of that?
got to get ahead of this.
Yeah, okay.
So I think this.
It's got to get ahead of this.
So the idea of this would be that in order to
Do it.
get that inclusion, that you would take some of the steps, like here, of expanding the publications and mailings out to
Yeah.
people and vice versa, opportunities to share history.
Again, the publications and mailing.
Citizen focus groups.
The publications mailing again goes back to this is education about what you have and what you can do. I'm trying to put people together in the same space.
Okay, so the idea is like the Citizen University and the Youth Action Council. and some of
It
those
may be,
others.
we talk about swapping the summer concert series sometimes over to Castle Hill, drag some Lewisville people over to Castle
So
Hill.
I do have a problem with that because we're talking spending money outside the city limits.
Depends on what you do and the timing of it.
Well, once they're already in, they're in the city.
Well,
But if they're not,
at this point in time, it's figuring out how to get them here, but once they're annexed in, it's also figuring out how to get us there.
Okay, so you're looking at actions that would happen inside the city as the city exists now, but
To try to
like
pull-
reach them out, and then as that annexation happens, then you're trying to do more out there. Is
Both
that
ways.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does that
the
clarify?
people I've talked to over the years, and this has been when we finally had a contract with the water and police and fire and all that, that most that I talked to said that they already thought they were in Lewisville anyway. They see the fire trucks, they see the police, and if they have a water issue, they call the water department out there, which deals with Lewisville also.
I think Neil is talking more culture than
It
service.
is a culture. I mean, the people who live in Oak Cliff will tell you they live in Dallas. Their neighborhood is Oak Cliff, but they live in Dallas, like the Grove. People who live in the Grove will tell you they live in Dallas. But they'll
I
also
think
tell you they live in
if
the
you're
Grove.
gonna look, Lewisville has a deal that a lot of, and TJ lives over there, they call that the valley.
Right.
It's really no different. That's just what it was, that's the subject.
Yeah, we don't live in Lewisville. We're in the valley. Y'all are our suburb.
But I mean, Oak Cliff was called that because it was a separate city at one time.
But the
And there were a lot of legal things that were, people were segregated over there and they put on public housing. That was part of it. But
So, okay, so I guess.
if I wanted to say that, yes, I want to do this, how do I vote? What number do I push? If I'm in
If you're
favor of,
working on that together?
yes,
Then I think you would say that you want to go ahead and fund it and start doing something next year.
so that's
That's
a higher number.
That's a higher number.
Can I just add something? So staff, in a sense, has already started this process. So we already do reach out to Castle Hills for education. You'll remember that the city already offers them the same resident rates as the people that live in Lewisville for use of our various facilities. So we're in the process of right now of holding a fire control sales tax election in that city to expand that district. And with that, there may be a question of whether you allow someone in Castle Hills to serve on your Fire Control Services Board, which right now is all of City Council. That would be a step, an additional step, Mayor, in that direction. But in a sense, we already do reach out, and I think the first step, more than anything, and the Mayor said it, is education, because there's so much confusion right now.
I have just an anecdote about that. I was talking to a couple about 2 weeks ago, and I asked them, whether, do you live in Lewisville? And they said, well, we thought we did. We have a Lewisville address. And then they said, but when we first moved here, we lived on the north side of 121, near the colony, and we were in Lewisville. And then we bought a house across on the south side of 121, and we went to vote and found out we could, in the city election, we found out we're not citizens of Lewisville. And so that was an education issue. They moved across 121.
Still have a Lewisville address.
Still have a Lewisville address, but they're not in the city anymore, and they didn't know it. And so I think there's definitely an education.
If they read their documents when they bought the property, it was said. So,
Okay, so let me ask you then the first question. How important is this outcome to Lewisville's future success? The outcome being that inclusion of the future Lewisville residents, current Castle Hills residents, into the Lewisville community.
so, and that's the ranking we're supposed to give?
How important is that? Yeah, very important, somewhat important.
I
I'm
would
going to ask
say,
that second
that's
question.
exactly the opposite of what I was talking about.
That other question's coming up next. This is just how important is this to you?
Okay,
That-
I'm getting confused. Because on the other questions, one was less and the highest number was more. And this
Now,
is the
beyond that,
opposite of.
there's 2 questions per issue. And you're thinking, the one you're thinking about is coming up next.
Right, but
On
if
this
I think
one-
this is very important, if
If
we
you-
go with what we've done before and what
If
we've
you think,
answered
if
to
you
that
think
like
this
question.
inclusion is very important, then you would pick number 1 on this question.
How come we're switching? That, very important was the number to the bottom before, and now it's the very first one.
No, I think they're the same. They're the same.
Well, then I need to change all my votes that we've done.
Okay, I'll make a note to address that then, when we look at that tonight.
So it's very important
It's
you
very
do one.
important to the future, then you select number 1, very important. Somewhat important, neutral, not very important, very unimportant, would be 5 if you think this is really something you don't need to be doing. 6, I'm not sure if you just throw it out there. Okay, so we have agreement on that. Okay, so Mayor, this is, I was thinking maybe you were focused on this. This is the question I thought you were asking me about a few minutes ago. If you want to move forward on it, what would you want to answer? And so if you want to move forward on it, I would suggest that you want to think about number 1 or number 2 of either fully funding an effort to do this inclusion next year, or partly fund some of it.
Well, I'll tell you part of my problem on it. I can't read it. But those are the rankings right now.
Yeah, so fully fund, number 1 would be fully fund next year. Number 2 would be fund some of it next year. Number 3, do more investigation next year. Number 4, defer action. Don't do anything next year, but do something in later years. Number 5, take no action. 6, I need more information. 7, we just need to have more discussion. Okay? And again, those are the same question choices for each of those. Okay, so we've got fully fund is 33, and partly fund is also 33. So then if you could put an A next to that one on the side there, we'll come back. This is one of those, this is where 2/3 of you feel like you
some of this previously, but hadn't really moved on that, developing unique identity for neighborhoods, create community-driven effort, which allows neighborhoods to get organized, have a plan of it. That second bullet goes back, I think, a couple of years for me. I had given it to Trent. Was this idea that just didn't come from anywhere. It wasn't a national league of cities or stuff I read, but I just having lived through, I've actually witnessed 3 tornadoes in my life and sat through the disaster of one of them in big time. Thought about, and on 2 different levels, going to neighborhoods with some sort of a package to say, look, here's what as a neighborhood you all can do to be prepared for disaster. And it might be the guy who says, I always have lots of batteries, so if somebody needs batteries for their flashlights, or the person says, I got a little league team, so I've always got lots of water. I mean, it's things like that. The other layer to this, so the obvious layer is that emergency preparedness and taking a lot of that off the city's back and trying to make it more of a local operation. The other layer to this is it's a bit like Neighbors Leading Neighbors. It's creates a social connections within the community, and I think that's just as valuable as the education of what to do in an emergency, if you want my opinion. Says it relates to thriving neighborhoods and so on and so on. The nice part was learning that our new emergency preparedness person, and it was like, wow, I didn't figure I'd thought of something new, but tells me that he implemented this very kind of plan in El Paso, and so it's kind of like it already comes packaged, and that's great. The other one is neighborhood enhancement program. So we talked about sign toppers, entry features, streets or escaping, bike racks, redevelopment. There's a bunch of stuff listed there. And so success be measured by how many number of neighborhood enhancement grants are awarded per fiscal year would be one measure. Number of neighborhoods enhancement projects that are completed, certainly a measure. Number of volunteers enacted in NLNs, another measure. Number of community emergency response teams formed, that would be a big one for me. And the obstacles, just everything you would expect in that list. So that's it.
Okay. And so go back to how.
I made up for my other one.
What's that?
I made up for the other presentation.
Okay, so the outcome then is that unique identity, having a plan for action that the community has developed and they're prepared to act. So
Yeah, it's the community. It's a 2-parter. It's the community, identity thing, but it's also this interaction of community residents for a very valuable purpose. That
so they're ready in case of a response.
Yes, and it's a lot of it's just education. Your cell phone's not going to work. Hit the highway, be prepared to just sit there. A lot of people kind of need a dose of reality of what to expect.
Okay. So comments, questions?
So I had a couple of thoughts. I felt that there was a lot of overlap with the things that we're already doing, which is great, which is fine. But what I really liked was the whole concept of that boosting that neighborhood identity piece through the emergency response. Usually neighborhoods only get together because, my car got broken into, now it's time to put a community watch together, and then that goes for 2 or 3 years until that particular person gets burnt out and nobody does it, and then it just falls by the wayside until the next car break-in. This provides a different animal, a different framing for that. Oh, by the way, as part of this package, you're gonna get this CERT, whatever we want to call that, and I've had the pleasure of working with Thomas here on a couple of different things, so I really do think we've got the right guy there to drive some of that. So while I feel there's a lot of overlap with things we're already in place, that particular nugget in here is what I really like.
It's my favorite part.
Okay. Other questions, comments, feedback? We're ready to give a response on that one?
I like this is my first time seeing the CERT program, and with the neighborhood identity program, maybe we can get some kind of competition going as the neighborhoods get their identities and everybody kind of puff their chests out about what's the best neighborhood.
Can you be more prepared than a Boy Scout?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So how important is this outcome to Lewisville's future success? The increased what should happen next on this issue, number 2? Fully funds, moving forward this next year, some of it, same choice. Okay, so 17 fully fund and 67 on partly. So let's label that one number B. Okay, and then let's move on to Councilman Gilmore.
All right, hold on. Because I think there's going to be a lot of value. You're going to want to bookmark mine. I want to thank the library and the 3D printer.
I can be able to bring ice cream.
So, all right. So,
I saved my tree, so I don't have to finish.
there you go. You saved the tree. You can bookmark something else. So I've had the opportunity to talk to Mayor Price in Fort Worth and really do some digging into this Blue Zones initiative that some of you may have heard about. It's a way to focus the community on more healthy lifestyles, healthy living. And what a Blue Zone is, simply they've identified 4 or 5 different communities that their life expectancy far exceeds the average in the world. The Seventh-day Adventists in California is one. A couple of neighborhoods or areas in Japan is another. And they've identified what those commonalities are, whether they're diet, exercise, those types of things. What I thought is really interesting about this is that while there is a city component to this, this is really going to require a lot of outreach to our business community to create it. So I'll be the first one to say that this probably won't be a funded thing in the first year or the second year, just from the dollar values that we're looking at, but it would need a commitment from council and staff to generate and fundraise, if you will. But the concept here is to help our residents experience and create more engagement with our Extending the Green, healthier lifestyles, those types of things. So as you can see the bullets down there. With that, I will entertain questions because I think it's a pretty simple, straightforward thing. This is a program designed to get your residents healthier overall, and it requires community engagement, both from businesses, from the municipality, and from your residents.
Question.
Yeah.
Has any, and I don't remember if this is really the right phrase, so anybody can correct me if it wants to. Has anybody ever done some kind of partner city with, like you talked about, there's a city in Japan or one in Europe? Has anybody ever done sort of a, you know what I'm talking about?
I haven't seen anything like that, like a sister cities for healthcare, for health or health and good living. Yeah, I mean, that'd be kind of interesting. I think that would be a riff on the Texas, what are we doing? The It's Time Texas.
Yeah, and I think it adds a kind of an extra spark of interest to the concept.
I'll be happy to travel to Japan and find that neighborhood. But
I've already been there, thank you.
so that's an interesting riff on this. I think this is a project. There is a short-term initiative in the city side to do a study in here, so there is a shorter timeline. I think my thought is I'd like to see if we can't get this going as a way to really maximize the impact of the multi-generational center as well. As we get the Expanding the Green, as all those new assets start coming online, we need our residents out and moving. And I think that's, you look at Amazon, and one of the things that they were looking for communities with healthy lifestyles and healthy alternatives. And in fact, one of the cities in Virginia just got hit this morning. They noticed a bunch of traffic from Amazon coming to see one of their environmental pages. They had 6,000 hits on this one page. So they're like, wait a minute, what's going on? People are thinking that's an indicator that Amazon has picked a city in Virginia. But it's their environmental policy.
So looking at those kinds of things, and so the action steps in what you're looking at is creating that coalition, looking at a potential contract.
Yep.
Trying to see about moving forward as part of that. And I think you said with business participants.
It would require business participants. So I mean, the hospital being one of them. And by the way, the hospital is an investor in the company that runs these Blue Zones projects. So there is a synergy there.
If I could add, Karen, I was on the phone with TJ, the company that carries out this project, and one of the steps, first steps, is this survey, pretty in-depth survey, which I think is very important, whether you fully do Blue Zone or it's a basis of it's Texas time. I think that would be very beneficial.
And so that would maybe be like the thing you do the first year?
Yeah, the first year is get a baseline, get a sense of community engagement, see where we are, and get also, that survey starts at getting our businesses to say, oh, I could participate in this. I mean, I know my company has a lot of health initiatives. A lot of our bigger companies do. So how do we get them tied in and give them those opportunities to engage with the community as well?
All right, good on that. So how important is this outcome to Lewisville's future success? Important one. What should happen next on this issue of interest? Okay, 0 on the first and 67 on the second. So I'm going to label that one under item C. Okay.
I'd like to thank the rest of the investors on the Shark Tank for your time.
Okay, another one for you, TJ.
All right, so this one, I've got a little bit of a passion for this one just because I think it's relatively low cost to staff. I mean, it could be a higher cost in time and whatnot, depending on how far we go. But I think this could be a real identifying differentiator for the city of Lewisville. And the thought is, how do we create opportunities for pollinator gardens and pocket prairies? How do we extend the green literally by taking the mission of UNT and LLELA and actually bringing it out into my front yard, your front yard, our parks. If you go over to Memorial Park, the Boy Scouts just put in a butterfly pollinator garden. So looking forward to seeing that come out of the ground here this spring because it got planted this fall. We are on the flyway, so we have lots of birds and butterflies and insects that come through. With the Monarchs, the Mayor's Monarchs program ties into this as well. So the issue you have in a developed neighborhood is that most of these things that support these critters are considered weeds. So your milkweed specifically. And we have ordinances about plants looking scruffy and whatnot. So how do we create an opportunity that our code enforcement, as they're going through a neighborhood, they can still enforce some aesthetics, but we can still have these pollinator gardens that might look a little more natural, but they're actually there for a purpose. And one of the thoughts I had on that is, how do we go ahead and certify? So a resident can come through and get some education, we can certify it, and we kind of keep a list there. It would also act as a fund generator probably for those materials, whether that's a Friends of LLELA or it's a Denton County Master Gardeners or some other organization that actually certifies these. But that would give our code enforcement the ability to say, this is a certified garden, so we're good. Whereas, if that resident hasn't redone it every year or hasn't kept up with it, then we can come back with code enforcement and enforce, as opposed to somebody saying, well, I haven't mowed my lawn for 4 months, it's Prairie, right? So that's the thought process is there. The bigger expansion of this is that we can actually use our park space, some of it, to actually generate some of this material. So the grasses, the prairie plants, those types of things. And again, that might be a Master Gardener's process or a Friends of LLELA or something like that. But we could also use it as feedstock for our plantings within our parks and our neighborhoods. I mean, we've been trying to move to a more natural, self-sustaining type of environment and planting. I know Councilman Ferguson is constantly about, what's the right trees and what's the right ordinance there. But I think if we can actually have the material, as opposed to just giving somebody a list, I think that's going to move the marker a bit faster for us. So I think this is a really cool differentiator for us as a city, and that we embrace what we're trying to do in LLELA and we bring it out. And so that's my pitch, guys. Let me know what you think.
Okay, what do you think?
Of course, why don't you do the monarch part in it?
I love the butterfly
Okay,
part.
We gotta have the monarchs. Okay, we got the monarchs in. Other comments, other feedback, questions? Ready to see? How important is this outcome to Lewisville's future?
TJ.
Did you figure out which button you were going to press? Hey, I'm good.
Okay. And what should happen next on this issue? Somebody still thinking? No, no. Somebody still thinking about that one? Okay, so 33 on the first one, and 17. But the rest of it, everybody else, the other half is more investigation during the next year. So
Fair.
I think
That's fair.
it's still clearly a lot of interest on that one. So
Thank you,
let's-
Council.
Let's move to Councilman Jones.
Hello, I am not TJ Gilmore. No, so what I'll be talking about is Business 121 corridor. And I'll go ahead and lead with the sale. This is something I think is very important to the city, but it's not something that we necessarily have to fund in this current budget. We already have some things that are going on in place. But what I've learned in my brief time on council is basically it's passing the time. You have to plan for the future. We're working on Old Town, and Old Town has been working on since you guys moved City Hall over here. As we go down Business 121 from one end to the next, you can see that's one area that needs some improvement and needs some sprucing up. So we have to take this a bite-sized piece at a time. The example I would use is Ross Avenue in Dallas. I've been here since 2011, and I've watched that transform from a used car lot to now expensive condominiums. I don't think that's what's going to happen with Business 121, but as it will be a main corridor, a main entry point from our Castle Hills residents into the city and others into the city, is something that we need to focus on. So one of the things that I've talked about, and where are we at here? So we need to basically pretty it up as best we can. I know there's some realignment of Mill Street that's gonna happen, that's gonna make that corner a lot easier to turn. That's already in the works and it's been planned for. The medians, the center medians is something that we can work on, you know, because if you go down the street, it's definitely sparkling and it can use some improvement. One thing that's not on here that we're probably not gonna get, but I'm gonna push for it anyway, because this is starting to talk, is it will need a third lane at some point. The TxDOT is trying to push Business 121 onto our pocketbooks. So before we let them do that, let's try to work them. Now, this may take 10 years, but we have to start the conversation now. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Like I said, this section that we're talking about is from Sam Ray to Mill Street. That's where we're starting. We're starting off small, and then we'll try to work our way toward 35. But this is where we're starting at right now.
Okay, and your item or your objective here is, your action steps is do that kind of assessment first, kind of figure out what kind of a program would need to happen.
And some of it is already underway, so there's already some action steps that are in movement. I just want to get us talking about it. Like Old Town was step by step. This needs to be the next step by step that we start.
Okay.
So I know this is gonna sound like a dig, and if it's a dig, it'll be a dig, not to you, by the way. Is that 6 retreats ago, we talked about amortizing zoning. And and the time frame discussed was perhaps 25 years. At this point, we'd be sitting at 19 years, but we've never done anything with it. And that would have been one way to start getting this cleaned up.
I can tell you that we talked about amortization of that area about 20 years ago.
Probably. So we do
I was
5
here.
So
years.
maybe this is
So
the year
maybe
to have
it's-
that conversation.
Yeah, so maybe this is the process for.
Let's do it.
Framework.
Let's get it. Every year we don't do it, it's another year.
That's all I have.
Yeah, I would like to add that we're talking about from Sam River to
To Mill Street, right?
Mill Street. Hopefully, part B of this will be to work on the rest of it all the way back over to 121 again.
That's the long-term plan, but,
Just, so we don't forget about it.
No, I drive past it all the time, but we have to take it in bite size most we can if we.
Yeah, and what you said about the state, that's gonna be on every state property for the near future, or for the long-term future.
that they were trying to get it back to you all.
Yeah.
Hey, they're doing it with schools, why not everything else? Oh,
Okay, other questions or comments? We're ready to have some feedback.
Yeah, I'll close the sale was very important, but we'll see how.
Okay, how important is this outcome, revitalization of Business 121? Somebody still thinking about that one? Yeah, maybe, yeah, there we go. Yeah, push it pretty firmly, so we'll make sure we get everybody, okay? We all agree this is very important. So what should happen next? What should happen as far as, should we fully fund those action steps next year, fund some of that next year, do some more investigation of the issue next year?
I like this one because it helps one of mine, Brandon.
Okay, so 17 and 67. And again, we're not going to ignore the other comments on these as well, but I'm just looking at those top two to help us then focus on priorities at the end of our discussion. Okay, so next issue.
All right, so this one's a fun one for me because tomorrow we'll get to see Clyde Park, which will help us kind of solidify some ideas for Wayne Ferguson Plaza. So I'll just go through the outcome desired is to get more programs and activities in Wayne Ferguson Plaza, probably starting on a weekend basis. We need to get activities such as, and one of the things that TJ actually brought up was the Denton County Master Gardens. We can work with keeping Lewisville beautiful. We can leverage LLELA and we have natural plants in there, so we can get a club going to actually make sure our native plant life that we have there is growing and people learn about it. We can do low stress activities, yoga and things like that. We can do smaller band activities where little groups, I know we have the Sounds of Lewisville with guitar players can actually come out in the park and actually do some things. The whole purpose of this is to use this park and to make sure that this gym that we have stays that way. This is not one of our regular parks. This is the park that's driving tourism and many other things. So we really need to make sure that we take care of this park. I think.
Go on, you've got some other action steps as well.
So yeah, I mean, some of the ideas that the staff came up with unstructured kind of linger activities. And one of the key things would be, you gotta get those bathrooms in there. There's cornhole, frisbee, lawn chess, Zumba. I don't know how well impact that might be, but okay. One idea I like is movie in the park. Other cities do movies in the park, like a family night, and we do that in the spring and fall. I'm trying to do something that's low impact on our budget, but that will help drive people. Obviously, we're building homes in that area, so the natural progression of people coming will be there. But we want the people who are here now to use Wayne Ferguson Plaza. This is not just for future residents or visitors, this is for everybody. So we really need to push that and get this park activated on a regular basis where people are every Friday evening or Saturday afternoon, they come out to this park. And they go to the MCO brand, and they go to the restaurants, and they go visit the other businesses in the area. So I think it's something that emerges with the area, and I think it works very well in the whole town. Success, if we find that document park visitors, I'm not sure how we can do that. There are ways to do it, but I don't think we want to spend the money on that. But getting regular programs, that's something that we can see. That's something tangible. We can see the number of activities that are out there. Engage the business partners in Old Town. One of the ideas I kind of threw out there was, we have bridal boutique there, and maybe they can do like kind of a bridal fashion show or something like that. That's something that showcases their business and the park at the same time. There are plenty of ideas that we can have, and I'll welcome anything from council that they think, because I'm not an idea person, but it's clear to me that the park, as great as it is not quite being utilized.
So it's really that getting that additional program and getting stuff going all the time.
Absolutely. And I forgot to mention that we get people to the visitor center as well.
Okay. So comments,
I
questions?
seem to jump in first a lot, but I'd like to see his cultural item mixed with his item. Use the park expose the different cultures we have.
So when I was reading through this, I was reminded of, I've got some friends that run a farmer's market in New England. And one of the things that they do is they actually have a booth set aside, it's a lemonade stand, for local nonprofits. And each month that nonprofit runs the lemonade stand and they get all the profits. So I got to thinking, well, how do we activate this using the non-for-profits, the cultural organizations, all of those folks, and just say, hey, we have a space here. And I don't know how we do it, because I worry about, because we've got rental fees and whatnot, but if there's a way we could create a program where Saturdays from 2 to 6, this month the Baptist Church Association gets it, and this month the Chin Society gets it, or I don't know. But then the effort and the marketing kind of gets defrayed a little bit off of staff, and it becomes more of a residents taking ownership of the space and using the space like you're talking about, and then it becomes it's more organic. Right, because the cool thing about the lemonade stand was that it always brought the people from that group to come help out fundraising, right? So you're getting all sorts of different groups coming in to experience Old Town, which is what we're trying to do.
Other comments, other questions, ideas?
Make sure we get you over a pumpkin spice stand.
Right, we're gonna get a pumpkin spice stand going.
I was thinking this is sort of an open mic for Wayne Ferguson Plaza.
Sure. I mean, they run. Maybe you provide the games and the giant chess set, and they kind of run everything. I don't know.
Okay, and you'll see more of some of those activities tomorrow at Clyde Warren, for sure. Okay, so how important is this outcome to Lewisville's future success? Outcome being that more constant programming and activating of Wayne Ferguson Plaza. Okay. What should happen next on this idea? Okay, so 33% say fully fund and 67 partly fund. So I think everybody's on the topic of we need to do something about this for next year. Okay. Next.
All right, guys. You handed out stuff.
You gonna give cookies?
If you've ever seen Miss Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Sundance said, I shoot better when I move. Okay, guys. Come on. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
In 5th grade, I got my favorite dog of all time, my favorite childhood dog, King. He was a big Samoyed, he was a white dog. I was in 5th grade. The first thing I taught him how to do was to sit. So after I got him how to sit, then it was to stay, okay? Being a bad kid like I was, there was nothing I loved more than getting King there, sit, stay, putting a treat or putting a dog bowl in front of him, and then stepping away and teasing him as he looked at that treat. I know, I was a bad kid, misfit youth. So, 4 or 5 years ago, we purchased this unique future parkland. It's post oak savanna, blackland prairie, undulating terrain, going into this defined creek bed. And when you're inside of it, you feel like you are in the wilderness and you have no idea you're just a few hundred foot either way from a 4-lane road. And for the last 4 or 5 years, people have been walking down Valley Parkway and they look in that park. We're going to stay. And for the last few summers, you're walking around Memorial Park in the beating hot sun, and right across the street is this shaded wilderness, and we're going to stay. Kids go over there and play on it. Neighborhoods call the police on them, and they're kicked out of it. People want to go there and take pictures, with their family for holiday events. And what are we doing? Stay. We're not letting them use this park. So it's a beautiful park. It's there. And the good part about it is we're so close to having it ready. We've torn down the homes. The natural thing is already there. All we need to do is move with it. So guys, I can tell you this, I'm looking for no answer on this one, but fully fund this puppy this year. I'm serious, how long are we gonna make people sit and look at this? This is the type of stuff we're having. You know, those kids that the police were called on, they're graduating and going to college now and they'll never have been able to use this property. We've got this right in front of them and we're saying stay. How long are we gonna keep doing that? So we got to $30,000 to get the design done. We got the conceptual designs done and everything, but we got the $30,000 to get that done now. We have to have that before we can move into requesting grants. And there's 2 big grants, and Stacy will know more about those, but we can do those grants, but we got to get the design funded and done, or we can't get anywhere with that. So after we get that, we've actually got an experience, there's a group that's wanting to use it this summer that we wouldn't even have to do anything for. It's a Timbernook experience. You know, interesting to find out, they found out the kids don't play enough outside and they need a place like this. So at least for this summer, before we get anything done, we can use that. So that's my pitch on this one, guys. Please fully fund this one. We cannot let people keep walking by this park and we keep saying, no, sorry, you can't use it. You know, and when we first came with this, I remember when I saw that land up for sale and I was like, oh my God, I emailed every one of the council members because I wasn't on council then. And then I got this big contingent and we were gonna go in front of council going, this land is great, we gotta have it. And then I got a call from city staff going, shut up, Brent, we're looking at buying it, don't raise the price. So everybody was excited from the very beginning and now it's staying. And on this one, I don't think we can ask them to stay any longer.
Yeah,
I'll sit. I'm not asking.
okay.
So he's walking over, I got
For
a
sure.
What's the total cost right now to do this? Not just the planning part, to construct whatever we're going to do.
To go back to that slide.
Let's see,
design
we've got
that-
the design, the 30,000.
Now, he's talking about construction. Go
Yeah,
back to
I
that
don't-
preliminary design.
I think the number I saw was about 300.
Is it on this slide, Gina?
The one you
Yeah.
just had up, Gina. This one?
No, concept plan you had up earlier.
This is the concept.
That's a
plan.
concept plan. Stacy?
It really depends on how much we end up executing. We could run from, 350,000 if we stay in the low type development to $1 million, depending on how
Well-
fast we go.
Were we going to build a parking lot?
No, sir.
Okay, so parking would be across the street,
Parking is permitted to be across the street at the Memorial Park area.
so 350,000.
To a
give or
million.
take.
It could get us a long way down. There'll be some things that we need to add that will cost money for ADA accessibility down the road, but that 350,000 would get us going.
Stacy, talk a little bit about why we haven't called it a park yet.
We haven't called it a park yet because one of the components and opportunities for us would, am I supposed to
Go
go
ahead.
Grants.
You could go ahead.
Okay, into
Pretty
the,
succinct.
with the Texas Park, I'm sorry, microphone.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oops.
I mean, I triple you.
One of the reasons.
Forward.
One of the reasons that we've not referred to it as a park at this point is because one of the opportunities with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department is to use the dedication of this as parkland as one of our matches for their funding for the outdoor recreation grant. So we're holding that in our hip pocket.
And Stacy is planning to submit for this grant.
In fact, we're looking to do it in October. I have a grant writer coming out to walk the property with me over the next 2 weeks to see what she thinks the best opportunity will be for us to go for.
So,
But we need that plan, right, to get the grants.
We'll need the plan. We'll need more, that will help us score a lot more points than just the conceptual because it'll say that we are shovel ready.
and for Timbernook to use it this summer, Stacy, talk the council through that.
So we're working with this group who takes kids out and kind of uses it as a camp adventure site. And we will try to be bringing a use agreement to you that'll be similar to our sports lease agreements. And it'll last over the summer and we'll see if it's a viable place to hold these camps in the future.
So Donna, the reason we've been holding off is primarily budgetary, correct?
Well, they're primary reason we've been holding off is we've been focused across the stream
Right.
on the MGC. And as we progressed, I'm glad we didn't do anything early on, because really the focus of that park has changed so much as we have talked about what the MGC needs to look like. It's rolling out from the 2025 plan and that focus on nature. You're going to see that focus in your MGC, and certainly now with Valley Vista Park. I should have called it a park. Stacy's going to yell at me now, but that property that we bought. But I certainly understand what Councilman Daniels is talking about. We do have requests to use this property, and I think the Timber Nook in the summer, it starts moving us in that direction. I think probably the design that you're talking about, we could fund that through your 4B fund.
If we can find the funding for it, if we can get grants, and I'm excited that we have a parks director here that drives this kind of thing. So, you know, maybe,
So am I.
maybe that we have the pieces in place to move forward on it, because I think it's going to be the vision that I have for it, I think, is outstanding, and I'm sure it's very similar to what Councilman Daniels has. But I was under the impression that a lot of it was just, number one, resources, making sure we had enough staff to handle the MGC and get it out of the ground, and number two was that there was some funding challenges to get whatever this design was and still line everything else up in the bond.
That and timing. I mean, that whole timing of what did it need to look like.
Yeah. So, okay.
Other comments, questions, feedback?
Comment I have is that this is why you need to buy properties when they become available, and it's the right time. Because if we hadn't done this, something would have already happened, and somebody would eventually got condominiums or townhouses built on them. So, that's it.
And we saw that.
I have a
We
question.
saw those attempts.
I have a question for the city attorney. Now that this property is bought, once done with it, and whether it's $300,000 or $1 million, do I have any constraints on my influence?
I think the councilman's talking about the fact he lives close to.
I'm that property on that southern border.
Maybe we can talk about this privately.
Okay.
So, how important is this outcome to Lewisville's future success?
Don't.
Here, hand that to me.
Okay, clearly important. What should happen next? Fully fund these action steps, and I think by that, I believe you mean funding that study as a
The design.
design study. Okay, 80 and 20 for fund some.
Okay, the next one is park technology, and this one is one that this is not necessarily a huge priority. This is one of those that's kind of the icing on the cake. So we have Wi-Fi available now in 3 parks: Wayne Ferguson Plaza, Toyota of Lewisville, and Lake Park. And from what I can tell, the coverage is good, the speed is good and everything, and we're in good shape on that. What I would like to do is see about adding additional Wi-Fi in certain parks. The first one to be Memorial Park, and to me, I think this is a good time to go in conjunction with the MGC. So MGC gets rolled out, you got that, the Wi-Fi is added to the park. I can tell you, I have been talking to a ton of kids lately, and for them, Wi-Fi in the park is huge, the free Wi-Fi, for several reasons. One, a lot of them only have limited, data, so they do it. And if they're doing any homework projects or anything like that, they don't want to use their stuff because then, they're doing that on Spotify and all that. So they don't want to use their data for that. So getting free Wi-Fi would be an advantage. And I think it's just a nice one to do I think we could start it with MGC and see how it goes, and then maybe from there go to Central Park and take a look at some of the other parks that may need it. The second part of this is also the technology of charging stations. And this is one, if you go through the parks, Toyota of Lewisville Park, that's kind of a completely different animal. I don't think we need it at Toyota of Lewisville Park at all, unless we're hearing meeting planners when they're booking their events, and this is something that Kunke would know, right? We're not gonna bring our teams and our tournaments back unless they have charging stations, and I don't think that's probably the case. But Ferguson Plaza, along that one row with Church Street there, you've already got outlets and power outlets that were there. It would not be expensive to just add the little ballards that would be there with the Wi-Fi where you could plug in and plug those in and have those along the benches there. And then also, once again, with the MGC, letting the designers plan this, how do we incorporate it into what's already there? I mean, here's some examples of some of the charging benches. You know, some of those are really ugly. So, I mean, I think we do something that's, you know, it'd be nice if it was solar, but if there's a power outlet that's already there, go to the next one, because there's some better looking ones later on. You know, and at the MGC, we may not want something this big. There may be something that we can include this somehow in the design that makes it easy without having something that stands out. I think it needs to be well marked so that people know where it is. It'd be nice if it's solar, but if there's power that's easy, that's there, this doesn't suck up a lot of power, and it's something that we can do fairly easily, and it's not a huge expense. And then the last thing on technology, keep going forward. Last thing on technology is adding cameras. And a lot of y'all have probably seen the Wayne Ferguson Plaza camera that looks down on it. So if you're missing an event and you want to go in there and see Western Days, you can see it. This one is really a low cost, and we've got cameras everywhere. And Chris showed us, can we see some of these cameras? I know Chris was able to pull them up, but probably not here.
Can you get them on this one?
Our security cameras?
Yeah.
No, sir, I don't have access to them.
Okay. We've already got a lot of cameras that are in the parks available, and it costs $300 to convert that to watch it. So instead of even having like one camera on Ferguson Plaza, we could do 2 or 3. We could do it on any of the other parks that we thought were good. I personally would like to see it on Main Street, and would love to see these people that have moved away from Lewisville, that they can watch a homecoming parade on the internet. And you know, for $300 to hook up a camera and make it live, I think is a very, very small expense, and would be something pretty easy to do. So 3 things all wrapped in one there.
Okay, so 3 things all related to technology in the parks. Questions?
So Wi-Fi charging stations and cameras.
Quick question. With the MGC, I'm assuming Memorial Park already has Wi-Fi, correct?
Yes.
So,
Memorial Park?
yeah, the building.
The buildings.
Oh,
Yeah.
buildings, the park does.
Right, but there is a Wi-Fi access if you
Now, whether
if
you
go to
could
the
get it
building.
maybe outside the, you know, just outside front, I don't know how
Yeah.
far it
I
goes.
mean, yeah, it's a question of how big the umbrella is, right?
Can you just speak to that?
Yes, inside the facility, there is Wi-Fi, and you're right, it will bleed over into the parking lot, but not much further.
Yeah.
Probably the first row or so.
It doesn't get out into the fields, but it does get to the parking lot.
Correct.
Yeah. And I'm going to assume that the MGC has a wireless infrastructure that's going to be going into it.
Yes, sir.
So you'll get some spillover effect that way, so.
Yeah, so it's really just kind of getting some of the seating areas, extending and putting whatever they are, Wi-Fi points, out within the park into strategic areas that people would use it. Out in the big middle of that field where people are kicking the ball, it would be a waste of, you know, but seating areas and around the edge and everything, I think would be good.
And you do realize we have residents that are really paranoid of those cameras because you'll know when I'm at the park, right?
Well, and I think if you do the cameras, you're doing the cameras, and we've already got. I thought we were going to be able to pull some up today. Chris had said we might be able to, but we just pulled up a few cameras when we were doing this discussion, and we actually pulled up one that was on by Ferguson Plaza, and it scans. So you actually see the 3 restaurants there. So if you wanted to like check out parking and see, man, are they busy? Can I get in now? It kind of scans there, then it scans over to Ferguson Plaza, then actually scans over to the front of the MCL. And for people to be able to see that and everything, and I know I'm kind of a dork, you know, I really am. But I'll be, like, if I'm going on vacation, I'll pull up, if I know I'm going on vacation somewhere, I'll pull up their cameras and I'll look at it there. I will pull, there's a couple bucket place lists that I want to go to someday, and I'll pull up the one in front of the Parthenon all the time, that it's this little cafe, and you can actually turn the camera itself, and you can see the Parthenon, you can see people sitting down there having their, you know, coffee and everything. I think it's cool. I love to go to Key West and get into Sloppy Joe's and look at everybody getting drunk in the bar. But I'm kind of a dork that way. But I think, especially in Lewisville, USA, that, you know, to be able to advertise it there for these people that have, you know, grew up, they, you know, graduated here, they haven't been back to a homecoming parade in 20 years, and to be able to say, hey guys, homecoming parade, watch it here. We could put the link there. And, you know, these people will be able to see a homecoming parade that they may not have seen in forever. And I think that would be kind of a neat deal to add to it. And the parks, you know, we'd have to put the right things. We don't want one that, you know, we got, you know, the wrong people looking and, you know, looking for kids on swing sets. But, you know, I think we can pick out the right ones that kind of give a flair for what's going on in the park or watching activities in the park, especially Ferguson Plaza, seeing that activity that's going to be going on there every Saturday from now.
Goat yoga.
Okay, other comments or questions?
I have a question. First of all, $300 per camera, that's just the camera, that's not.
No, that's to set it up. If we have the camera already there, it's $300 to make it go live.
But it's not putting it up on a pole.
It's on.
Right, this would be using existing cameras, which we have.
That was my
90.
point.
Yeah.
It's not putting it in, it's not a freestanding.
That's not
going to pay for a freestanding.
$1,500 would buy the new camera.
A quick thought, and it's not real important, but you have LELA, the house LELA gate. I'd scratch both of those and put a solar camera out in the new parade station. I think that's a fascinating operation that few people know is out there. The gate's not that, I mean, it's.
These are ones that they're already there, and this is just a small sample.
And that's there
of
for
what's already
security.
So, but that idea could go further than that.
You might want to put one at where the kayaks launch.
Yeah.
Something
And
like
again,
that, so you can
By
see
the
what-
eagle's
Look at
nest.
going solar, because if it shuts down at night, then it shuts down at night.
Okay? Now, how important is this outcome to Lewisville's future success? The outcome being the technology and the parks, the three different technologies. Okay. So what should happen next on this action item? Okay, so 33 and 17.
Everybody split decisions.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, Mayor Durham.
First item is on the park plan. There's a part A and a part B. Part A is trails. I just hope that we can continue expanding the trail system. We've hit a dead end in some places, just waiting for other things to happen, particularly around Railroad Park, getting over into the LLELA deal. How we work out with LLELA, that's a whole other matter. But I wish to continue that. The second item is the acquisition of additional properties that will be used for the trails. It will be used for the two properties I'm thinking of would also be river access and for corporate that's going through.
So you've got some different action steps. I know about specific properties, I think is some of the
I've tried to say that
specific
without saying the name of the
Well, we
property.
put a map up to help you, Randy.
Do what?
We put a map up to help you.
Oh, very good. Find Bob Hope on there, and then Lake Australia. And that's the two properties. But that's my whole pitch on that, is that, And it goes back, somebody mentioned that a while ago when we were talking about that other property, that we need to buy it when it's available and we have the money. And we can do that, at least one of them to get sold right now.
Okay, and so the steps about that is figuring out the appraisals and moving forward on those
Yeah.
kinds of things.
Yes, before something else happens.
Sources.
That's all I have on that one. The second part is the utilities.
Okay, hold on
Okay.
for that one. Let's just focus on that one first.
Huh?
Okay, so questions, comments, discussion on this one. This is the acquisition of some key parcels of parkland acquisition. Questions, comments? Is that clear? Okay. How important is this outcome to Lewisville's future success?
And if I can add right here, I'm not necessarily talking about those two properties being all the property I'd be concerned with.
Okay.
This would be on anything that would be coming up in low areas, along creeks, under power lines, whatever that we can connect other things with.
Okay, so these are examples.
Yes.
But you're really talking about having that process, so you're ready to acquire lands when they come available that you've identified.
Yes.
Okay? So what should happen next on that proposal? So fully funding, I would say, is that's moving forward with kind of figuring out that process, understanding where those are at.
Have to have a commitment to do it and figure out where we're going to get the money.
Okay, finding the funding sources. Somebody still thinking about that? Okay, so 33. 33. That makes that one number G. Okay, so now utilities.
Okay. I started this about the first retreat I went to a long time ago. And we started off to put, anytime we had a chance that we'd put all the utilities underground, all the overhead utilities underground, except for the high-powered transmission lines. That just gets too expensive and sometimes impractical. I guess I've been talked out of it, but it's going to be a cost issue. That what I'm down to now is that basically looking at anything the council wants to put underground, like when the city buys a property or the roadways that's being expanded, that we could go ahead and put it under as part of the road contract to put the utilities underground. What I would also do on that is not make it a hard and fast rule that it had to, but that it would generally be there, and if the council didn't want to pay for the utilities to go underground, then it wouldn't happen.
Okay. And so what it sounds like to me that you're saying is having sort of a policy of how you're going to go about doing that, which kind of projects you do it, what kind of circumstances.
For example, when we did City Hall, we put all the utilities underground. When we did Ferguson Plaza, we put it all underground. I would like for us to start with roadway construction that's coming up, that we've got to move the utilities anyway, that we look at putting those underground. Staff has pointed out quite a few different areas that it really didn't matter if they were still above ground. But we don't know what's going to be there 30 years from now. But I'd like to look at those, but always have the council have the final say to say, no, we don't want to pay for that.
Okay. But it sounds like you're saying that you want to have sort of a system or process so the staff knows to evaluate that on targeted kinds of projects.
The utilities, the cost to move them is already have to be done anyway, if it has to be moved. And then we would go, what is the difference between putting it underground and leaving it above ground.
And I
It's-
might,
Go for it.
I might add too that you don't necessarily have to put all of it underground. So we could bring an estimate, there would be the full roadway, but let's say you really decide 2 blocks of that are really key for beautification purposes. Then we could just do that smaller area. And in the Old Town, the Main and Mill area is a really good example of where we've done some of that.
I'll give you another example too. It might be one side of the road. If you look at the west side of Inman, well, actually, if you look at Inman just in general, that there's such an offset of utilities. And then, of course, on the east side, those are major power lines. So
Where you can't.
it kind of depends on, what you got and how ugly it looks and how close it is to the road.
So there would perhaps be some cost for staff to add that into our design work, to do the projections, but we can certainly do that.
And again, I'm only talking about ones where we have to move the utilities anyway.
So you're already dealing with something about those utilities.
And in my simple mind, I'm thinking about there's only one little piece, and it's just the difference between putting it above ground and going under the bridge. As staff will tell me, and I understand, that there are other costs involved. Long-term maintenance, if you have to move it in the future, then it becomes just the city's responsibility.
That's correct.
So comments, questions?
It makes such a huge, I mean, if you drive along 3040 and it's all above ground and then you cross over into the next town, it makes a huge difference. It is striking, the difference.
Other comments, questions? Okay. It's obstacles, okay. How important is this outcome to Lewisville's future success? Pretty important for that one. What should happen next? And I think in this case where it says fully funding these action steps, it sounds to me like that's fully funding, getting the system in place, figuring out how you're going to do those cost estimates or which projects you're going to do them on, so the staff knows when to bring that to you as part of
And
it.
I would say anything that's already in the works to be done would be too late to do this anyway. If we'd already made the decision to build the road and put the utilities above ground.
We could certainly bring you those costs, but it would probably mean that other projects would be delayed.
Right. So you'd have to come up in another place to get the money.
Yes, sir.
But with that caveat.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So with that caveat, what should happen next on that proposal? That's the proposal for fully funding or partly funding. Okay, so 50 fully fund and 33 partly fund, and so that then is number H. Okay, and so with that, I think that covers all of the proposals from all of you. I think at this point, you all should give yourselves a round of applause. I'm very with the ideas, with the dialogue, with the presentations and the discussion. And, to me, it seems like there's a lot of really good ideas and a lot of good dialogue and building on one another's ideas as we've gone through the discussion.
I think that's one thing that really I thought was interesting is you could see some threads in a lot of these presentations.
Yeah, there were several of those that
where
really
they would
relate to one
overlap,
another.
which gives me hope for the ones that didn't necessarily make the cut.
Yeah.
Some people never give up.
Yeah, let me remind you that just because the ones that didn't make the cut here doesn't mean that they have disappeared, or that we won't go along with them. But I think that synergy was really great. And also, I think it's interesting how several of these items are already tied in with things like that Parks Master Plan that you just saw. So there's already a lot of things moving forward.
Well, and I think council looks at these, I know I do, because we've got a lot on our plate and trying to find things that are relatively low impact but could have good return on the investment. So I was really pleased to see that.
This was a money clip instead of a paper clip. Would that make it a little different?
No, you mean if it had money in it?
I just want to say that I think we should have applauded ourselves for getting through this 45 minutes early.
Yeah. Wait.
James Hill last night. There was one picture, but it doesn't show all lines of land in the 50s. And you can see how many lines there are. But the one back in the 20s, they were just stacked on top of each other. Probably had 5 or 6. Where the front of them companies have to have a separate line for each one. And that's why you have to do a switch.
No, you're not doing
Let's take a 15-minute break.